Hey guys, welcome into another episode of From the Wing. I'm Christian Clark, the Pelicans beat writer for NOLA.com and the Times-Picayune. On today's show, we're going to talk about Monty Williams, who was let go in Detroit today. We're going to talk about James Borrego, who is a candidate for a couple of these head coaching jobs, but has not been hired yet. I thought there was a chance that might happen today. It hasn't happened yet, and I'm sitting here wondering why, what's going on. We're going to talk about some finals takeaways, and then we're going to finish up with some NBA draft talk and give some predictions at the end of the show, what we think the Pelicans are going to do with this 21st selection. It feels like there's so many different options that they could do with this pick, whether it's just use it, trade it, move up, move down. It feels like it's all in play. Adam, a bomb on the timeline came this morning from Woj. It was like 8 a.m. or something. And we got a Woj bomb that said the Detroit Pistons are firing Monty Williams after one season. This was something that people in NBA circles were watching closely. I think part of the reason they were watching it was Trajan Langdon has not had his introductory press conference in Detroit yet. I mean, anytime you go out and get a new lead basketball executive, you have him meet the media, you try to win the press conference. Well, the Detroit Pistons have not done that thing yet. And people were correctly speculating, that it was because they were deliberating Monty Williams' future, the former Hornets Pelicans coach, the former Phoenix Suns coach, who his coaching tree is now coaching New Orleans, is out in Detroit after 1 year.
You always say that the G moves in silence like lasagna. And here we are, no press conference, and off we go. I didn't think this would go this way. And I now it leads me to like a conclusion of what I think will happen. I would imagine that they were open to keeping Monty with this giant price tag. And that if you're going to come in this late and start a coaching search at this point, that signals to me that Trajan already knows someone who's available that he's going to take, and that Gore's probably signed off on it. And it was basically Monty's going to stay for a year while we wait out and do a coaching search next year. And then they're like, well, this person's out on the market. Do you want to just do it? And Gore said, like, if you want to rip the Band-Aid, we can do it. And they're going to do it, which points like a neon sign at one specific person, just given the lay of the land right now and the timing, which is interesting. So, yeah, this is really, really expensive. Monty, absolute legend at the bank, $20+ million from the Suns, $65 million to go away from Detroit. Look, for everybody who tried to turn this into where's Monty going to coach next? Look, I made a joke about, and I hinted at this joke like a week ago, that the thing that I needed to happen if this script was for me was that he gets fired or traded to the Lakers and they reunite him with Anthony Davis, his one true love. But that's not really going to happen. The guy's got another $70+ million coming to him from two teams. He didn't want to coach Detroit. He told them no, and they bid against themselves to make him coach. And then he was a miserable coach. He's going home. Like Woj says, like mentioned in the tweet, that his wife has a cancer diagnosis. This guy has been through so much in his life. I would imagine that at least for a year, he's going to go hang out. He's just going to go like take a step away for a little bit and bring his life back a little bit. If he wants to come back to the NBA, there will be no shortage of people who want to have Monty Williams on their staff. He doesn't need to do that right now.
Including Willie Green in New Orleans. I mean, Willie Green loves Monty Williams, thinks of Monty Williams like a brother. I mean, those two guys had a nice little run there together in Phoenix. I mean, I think Willie would love to bring Monty to New Orleans to be an assistant. I checked in on it today. It sounds like the front office, they're open to that idea, but I did not talk to one person today that was like, yeah, I think there's a good chance Monty coaches next year. Exactly what you said. He's made an enormous amount of money. He's getting paid a lot of money to not work. There is stuff going on in his personal life. He wasn't extremely passionate about becoming the Detroit Pistons head coach in the first place. It was an overwhelming amount of money. And he even talked about that on the record openly, that convinced him to do so. So it would be a surprise if Monty Williams is coaching, as a head coach, as an assistant, in any official capacity in 2024, 2025. Maybe he does like the little consulting work or
Yeah,
something like
love
that, and
that.
lives wherever he wants to.
Yeah.
So that's the forward-looking part of this. Let's talk about how this happened, because when the Detroit Pistons hired Trajan Langdon as their lead executive last month, there was reporting from Detroit people. James Edwards, who's a very good beat writer for The Athletic, said, hey, look, Trajan Langdon is going to be able to make whatever moves he wants to make in the front office, at the coaching level. The Pistons parted ways with Troy Weaver, not much of a surprise. And then people were wondering about Monty. And days turned into weeks, weeks turned into about a month. It seemed like Trajan, for a while there, people were kind of suggesting he'd be okay to like go a year with Monty. It really seemed like the thing that pushed this over the edge was Tom Gores, the owner there, being like, no, we can't do this another year. I think the reporting from Woj was this was like a direction from Tom Gores of like, let's make a move here. I mean, this was the owner trying to, 1 year after he wowed Monty Williams with a $76 million offer, saying, no, we have to go in a different direction. I am going to eat $65 million.
Yeah, this is, and like I said, we already couched this with, you only do this if you have already talked through the scenario of who the next coach is going to be. Like they're not going into this blind. They're not making that decision and taking that haircut. But I can appreciate the fact that, like, if you already know what the end result is going to be, that this is going to be a lame duck year, and Monty just gave you a year of playing Killian Hayes and Isaiah Stewart as starters until you force him not to. I mean, what's the point of doing the lame duck year if the owner is saying he's willing to pay the money?
And
So
I don't know how much that's made an impact on Trajan. I haven't talked to him about it. I've got no sense, but he is coming from a situation where they had a holdover head coach and new leadership, and it went extremely poorly. Like, we do not need to rehash those details, but it went extremely poorly with David Griffin coming in as a new executive and Alvin Gentry there as the existing head coach. So, that is a situation that Trajan was just a part of.
something tells me it wouldn't be handled exactly the same way that one was, but good point. Like, he could immediately tell Gores, like, here's how it went for us and why this wasn't like a great thing. Like, when you're strapped to somebody that you didn't pick, and you're trying to do, like, they're doing a reset. That franchise, while it has some players, some youth that you want to find out about, they know nothing right now. It has been a mess. The draft composition, the roster composition for the last few years has been an absolute mess. This is a reset, and seemingly like a small reboot with a couple of pieces that they're interested in keeping. So you got to just set your, like, what is the franchise in your image? What is the model in your image? What do you value? And you really do need to start doing that. Like, look, Gore's, like a lot of high-level executives, I'm sure, has said these two words 100,000 times in his life: fail fast. That's the choice here. They're deciding to fail fast and pivot to Trajan's view of the world. And this is very likely part of, like, Trajan agreeing to go there, was that he had to have this ability and that they would talk it out and be very serious. That's probably why it took so long. And also there's just kind of like waiting out the NBA finals and stuff like that. Like that kind of stuff does slow things down. It's a weird time. But yeah, this is the right move. Like we said this, clean house, do it. You got to start over. There's no direction there. So, good for Trajan. And apparently Fred.
Who is staying per the reporting from The Athletic. And, Fred Vinson, I think, got a pretty nice raise when he was in New Orleans, deservedly so. He did some nice work here with Lonzo Ball and Brandon Ingram and later Herb Jones. And I'm assuming he's not leaving for Detroit for the same amount of money. So Fred Vinson is doing pretty good at life over the past 5 years or so. Good for him. Well-deserved. A couple of the names that got floated to be the head coach of the Detroit Pistons are people that, I think Pelicans fans have some familiarity with. James Borrego, who we're going to talk about in a second. Another name on there was Will Weaver. I thought that was an interesting name because Will Weaver and Trajan first worked together in Brooklyn before Trajan came to New Orleans. When the Pelicans were hiring right after Alvin Gentry, Will Weaver was, one of the names that got talked about a little bit. I think there was some discussion about bringing him in to be like a lead assistant coach post Alvin. That never panned out. He never joined the Pelicans in any capacity there. And Sean Sweeney, who's no New Orleans ties there, but was an assistant in Detroit and was just with the Dallas Mavericks. He's another name that people are talking about. It seems like people think has a good chance to get that job. I guess we could pivot to Borrego here. You had a little bit of a spicy opinion on social media that maybe there's too much being made about Borrego, maybe an overestimation of him and his coaching ability. I like Borrego a lot. From what I can tell, I think he's got a lot of potential as a head coach. I think he did some pretty nice work in Charlotte. I don't want to oversell it or anything, but can you just explain why you think I think you think Borrego is being overestimated by the Pelicans fan base?
Yeah, we're just kind of overcooking the grits here a little bit. I'm not trying to say that like Borrego is like a bumbling idiot or anything like that. But the last time that James Borrego was a hot name was 2017. He was the Spurs assistant that everybody wanted to get after. He went to Charlotte. He got a team full of dudes who love to chuck threes and not play defense. And you know what they did? They chucked threes and they didn't play defense. And it was a pretty potent offense. And that's cool. And what ends up happening? He lost some really, really lopsided games and then ended up not being there. So it's more that I really, really struggle with. It was a cool idea. Like, I totally understand when we brought him into the Pelicans. I totally understand. It's a cool idea to bring this guy that did this unique offensive thing, with the amount of volume of threes when people haven't really leaned all the way into that stuff yet. Like, look at the Celtics this year. Like, this was one of the big forays into that. It was a unique thing to add to Willie and see, like, can this guy help him expand, like, the dynamism of our offense? And what it looked like he wanted to do was just play Matt, Ryan, and Hawkins over two guys that, I'm sorry, we're just better basketball players than them.
I don't know. It feels like there's a lot more to it than that, and we're probably never going to get the full story. I wouldn't.
Sure.
That sounds like reductive.
Sure. Okay. Well, let's put it this way. If I have to if there's anything that I can give him credit for during this season, I could point at him and I can say, this is the thing that I know he did. I know that our starters felt like he really knows his stuff on offense, because that's the one thing I have is a quote from CJ and a quote from Zion and a quote from BI that JB really knows his stuff. But that's all I know, because he's an assistant coach and it's hard to know where he starts and stops. But I think we know that if the offense was entirely under his control, it would have looked a little different. And it did, like, early on during injuries, and then things kind of went a different way. I have my own thoughts about why that happened and everything. But the main message of the tweet that I immediately muted after I posted it was just like, this is a lot of talk for a dude who, like, the hypothesis was, oh, he's going to go to Detroit now. What a win for them, and what a death blow for us. What's the seismic change in our offense that he contributed to that you see? Because I don't see it. So
yeah, I mean, like the Hornets won 43 games in his best season as head coach, and like it wasn't a great roster or anything like that. I mean, I thought he cooked a decent meal with some meh ingredients in Charlotte. It feels like it feels like what's going on a little bit too. And again, I like Borrego. I think he's like, if he takes that Cleveland job, I think they'll probably be good next year. It feels like the Pelicans were in their honeymoon phase with Willie Green, the fan base too. And it's like, okay, we've been dating for a while and we moved in together. When you move in with somebody, you learn what all their flaws are. And we know what Willie Green's flaws are. The honeymoon phase is long gone. We don't really know what any of James Borrego's flaws are, because, James Borrego is just that coworker who you kind of half flirt with sometimes. I mean, there's not that familiarity to, like, you don't know the downsides of it. You're only seeing the upside of it. And I think there is a lot of upside, but I mean, I guess I'll just leave it at that. I think James Borrego's got a lot of potential, but look, I don't think the Pelicans should like knock off Willie Green and promote James Borrego or anything like that. And I think, look, when you just look at the whole picture of what Willie Green has done in these 3 years, they need to show growth this upcoming season, but you just have to remember what this franchise was when he came aboard. Those first 2 years with Griffin Zion were an absolute dumpster fire, and they're in a much better place than they were 3 years ago, whatever you want to say.
Yeah, so what you just described is the internet, the meme where the guy's walking with his girlfriend and he's looking back over his shoulder going, "Ooh." Yeah, so what we do know about Borrego is that he used to be like a hot name, and he coached a resetting franchise that had no expectations with a bunch of dudes who were already shooting a ton of threes, and they shot a ton of threes and they didn't defend. They won more than 40 games. There were no expectations. That was cool. And then he ended up not coaching there anymore. And that team has been aimless ever since. That, far be it from me to decide what the hell's going on over there. Yeah, it's just a lot for like a dude that like hasn't achieved anything either. Like, as much as we're saying that we don't know what his flaws are, we certainly haven't seen him create a team that defends. And we saw like a thought experiment in Charlotte, franchise that had like really not a lot going for it other than like some young talent that was willing to shoot. So that's really it. It's just the outsized reaction is tough for me. He's interviewed for LA. He's interviewed for Cleveland. I would surmise that he's not the favorite for either, because he interviewed for both of them like quite a long time ago. And the names, the searches are still ongoing. Like, the Lakers moved on to a JJ Redick interview. They offered the job to Hurley. I would think it's safe to say that it's not going to be Borrego. And he clearly wanted the job, and I would imagine he wants the Cleveland job. We haven't heard anything out of Cleveland either.
Yeah, there was a Jake Fisher tweet today, and I heard from some other people, well, I think a decision on the Cleveland Cavaliers job might come today. We're recording this at 7:55 p.m. Central Time. Still nothing. It's a little bizarre. I mean, I think Borrego was in Cleveland last week, met with them, met with some of the players. It's just a little strange. We haven't got a decision yet. I'm just really curious what they do. And I like Borrego quite a bit. I think if he takes that Cleveland job, they're going to be good next year. They've got a lot of talent.
Offer it to him.
They play in a weak conference, but yes, you gotta land the plane. And we're at the point where it's like, okay, why hasn't this happened yet? Why hasn't this gotten finalized?
When the Cleveland search started, Woj came out the gate real hot with Kenny Atkinson as like the name to watch in the tweet saying that Cleveland was firing Bickerstaff. Like, he did the Kenny Atkinson's the guy thing. And then we didn't hear anything for a long stretch here other than just like who they're looking into. We heard, dark horse Chris Quinn from the Miami Heat. It would not shock me at all. Like, Chris Quinn is tied to Dwayne Wade. Dwayne Wade has spent a little bit of time there, is super tight with Donovan Mitchell. Wouldn't shock anybody if a Miami Heat coach ended up over there. Wouldn't shock me if it's Kenny Atkinson, who's been like talked about and sought over to the point where he agreed to take Borrego's old job with the Charlotte Hornets, and then at the last minute said, you know what, never mind, this is kind of crazy, I don't like these people, I'm going to go back to my old job.
I remain convinced that the hardest thing an NBA coach has to do is hold his players accountable without losing the locker room. It's the trickiest thing. I think, the very best head coaches, they could all do it for different reasons, but like Willie Green, you could say, well, and people do complain about this. Like, he doesn't hold BI and Zion to the same standard as the other players. And I think that's true a lot of the time. I just think that goes on with a lot of these different teams. And the number of people who actually can do that list is very, very small. Like Udoka, Spoelstra, definitely Popovich. Kerr's kind of unique because it's just like Steph is just like this perfect franchise player. You have Draymond to be your competitive fire. But my point is, like, the list of people who do that, of can hold players accountable without losing the locker room, is so small. And I do think people in the NBA had that question about Borrego too. Can he do that? And it's hard. It's hard. It's easy for me to sit here and say, like, Zion, get in shape, dude. It's way different if you're coaching the team, and you get tuned out. We saw what happened with Stan Van Gundy. He got tuned out. I mean, he was more old school guy. There was almost a mutiny. He got let go after 1 year. So we've seen what can happen when you try to go too hard.
I think it's interesting to me that Will Weaver is the other name for the Pistons job. It is not going to shock me at all if Borrego doesn't have a shot at the Lakers job or Cleveland. I just think about what those jobs are and what the ask is. Forget the roster fit and the threat of like, oh, there's going to be 2 guards. I have to sell that those hires are real hires. The Lakers have to hire a guy that the whole team believes in, that they can sell is like either like a creative hire, different in some way. They just dismissed 2 winners. They just sent out 2 winning coaches. They can't just do anything normal. Like I honestly kind of get the JJ thing over there, because it's like we're going to try to be different and cutting edge with the way we do this. Like maybe we'll strike gold here. I kind of get it.
And you just
In
have extreme
Cleveland,
buy-in from the second greatest player of all time, which is a good way to.
We think maybe we do. He's done so like just quick tangent. LeBron has done a lot this offseason, this summer, to try to distance himself from the decision-making process or comments about the decision-making process for both the coach, the draft, anything that indicates that he is activating his player option or not doing it or leaving or wants to be traded.
Yeah, because he doesn't want a Westbrook 2.0 situation where he gets blamed for it going wrong.
Correct. But it's weird because normally he's been very clumsy about these things and has just kind of been like out in the street with like things that are very easily trackable back to him. Like people call him La GM and all this stuff. And he's really distanced himself from it intentionally this summer. But Cleveland as well. You just like, as much as people want to believe, and I'm going to use Pascal Siakam as an example, and then we can move on from this. Pascal Siakam gets traded to Indiana. I am of the belief, because of what my eyes tell me, especially out of what I've seen transpire in OKC over the course of the last 8 years, that when a player that is perceived to not want to go to a small market agrees to go to a small market, it's usually because some sort of promises have been made about something, whether it's going to be, hey, you're only going to be here for a year and I'm going to help you move on, or I'm going to quietly move you to Los Angeles as long as you cooperate with me. I'm going to need you to resign. Like Pascal Siakam, I did not have a doubt in my mind that when he agreed to go to Indiana, when Indiana trades for him, he'd already told Indiana he was going to extend. Donovan Mitchell, I don't believe this whole thing where we supposedly fierce GMs take a risk on a guy and then they convince him to stay. They just like dare him to come to their franchise. And then they're just amazing executives who turn the image around and get him to buy in. Like, no, they tell these guys up front, like what the deal is. And they tell them like, here's the idea. Here's what I'm selling to you. And the guys buy in. So Siakam stays. Donovan Mitchell's going to extend in Cleveland. And I am 100% of the belief that there are promises that are contingent to that. One of those, I think we've already seen executed in JB Bickerstaff. And I would imagine there are more, because he can't look at the roster that played in that playoffs and say that this is the optimal construction for me. And Donovan is in his prime. So if you're extending him, there's already like rumor out there that it's going to be a 3-year with a player option. Like the heat is out there saying what he's going to sign. I would imagine that there are more contingencies that have been promised that are part of that agreement to an extension, which I think we'll hear about fairly shortly, but I think they're going to hold out on it as long as they can for trade purposes. I think they got to nail these hires. I think these hires have to be big time. That coach that goes to Cleveland needs to be a guy that Donovan says, this is going to be my dude. And it's just really hard to believe that retread coach that, like it or not, failed in Charlotte and was an offensive assistant on a team that didn't have a great offense is just like a hard sell for me to say like, Dad, that's the guy. Whereas Atkinson kind of left like a winning situation and then went and was an assistant on successful teams and is still highly respected. To
be fair, Borrego literally left a winning team. Like they won more than they lost. And then he was an assistant on a successful team. I mean, I know the first round didn't go very well, but yeah.
It's just weird. Like he coached for what? It was 2 years.
Okay. All right.
It's just weird. It seems like a tough sell for like a Donovan Mitchell. I traded for a star, and now I got to tell him this is the coach that's going to get us there.
If Borrego gets hired, trust me, they will have talked to Donovan and he will sign off on it.
Yeah, no doubt. I am implying that. I just don't believe that would be the case. Anyway, moving on.
All right. Some NBA Finals takeaways. Celtics wrapped this thing up in 5 games. Pretty underwhelming finals. I think a lot of people thought that the Mavericks could make this a series. I thought the Celtics were going to win. I picked them in 6. Ended up getting it done in 5. Luka was probably the best player in the series, but it didn't really matter. He definitely could have been better at points. He could have been less whiny in game 3, played better defense. But the Celtics were just a better team. They were a better matchup for the Mavericks. And we spent a lot of time on last week's episode just giving Joe Mazzulla some love. And I do think Joe Mazzulla is like looked at as like, man, this lovable weirdo. And he is a lovable weirdo. But like one of my takeaways coming out of the finals was that, who like one of the true blue believers in 5-out seems to be after reading all the stuff is Joe Mazzulla. Like it really seems like he is like, this is the way I want to play. I believe our ceiling is tied to playing 5-out. They went out and obviously made the Porzingis trade. And if they are not a 5-out team, I don't know if they win the title this year. Like I really think 5-out is such a cheat code and it raised their ceiling. And it seemed like Mazzulla, from everything I could tell reading about it, was like one of the biggest proponents of it.
Yeah. So I think so. The question here is essentially like, if they weren't a 5-out team, it's tough for me because it's not like those guys, like this is a legendary level of play to get from your top 8 players. Like you have perfect glue dudes all over that everybody in the league would kill to have at the same time. And you have them next to 2 of the hyper athlete wings in the game. Oh, and by the way, the glue guys are all wing sized. So they're huge.
Your smallest guy in the starting lineup is Drew Holiday, who is a tank.
They're huge. They're hyper athletic. They can all dribble. They can all pass. They can all run plays, and they can all shoot a little bit. So for me, it's hard to sever style from just the amount of talent they were able to get by taking bets on guys that were, at the very least, a little bit of distressed assets. And they just bet on 3 and they were all home runs. Like they weren't B pluses. They weren't C's. They were all A+ home runs, including Porzingis. Like they knew what they were doing and they had a plan for how to insulate themselves against it. And they got that extension done, which I think people were even like nervous about at the time. Like, hey, injury history. I told people during the series, like, honestly, my biggest question is, can Porzingis show up back from injury and have an impact? And how long does his body hold up? And he got hurt again in the series, but it just so happened he played his best basketball before that was allowed to matter. So he punched the Mavericks in the mouth for, a game and 3 quarters. And then, they didn't get that third game. And that's the only way that they would have like had a chance of breathing life into the series. So yeah, I don't know. I don't know where to stop with that roster's amazing. And I should give more credit to Brad versus giving it to Joe because stylistically, like, and play execution wise, this just works.
I mean, truly an organizational championship. I mean, just an incredibly well-run franchise at every single level, starting with ownership of, hey, look, Danny Ainge, his time here is done. We're going to replace him with Brad Stevens. I mean, man, the reception about that at the time was like, oh, Brad Stevens is going from coach to lead executive. Like, that's weird. We just woke up and announced that one day. And I mean, it literally could not have gone better. Like, I mean, GM Brad Stevens has done some amazing work, like some of the best trades, we've seen in the past 10 years. The Derek White thing, getting off of Marcus Smart at that time, going out and getting Porzingis. Yeah. I mean, look, it's just every level. They're so impressive. I mean, steady, good ownership, absolutely the right move. Putting in Brad Stevens as lead exec. The Udoka thing, extremely messy. And then having the confidence in, I think he was 34 at the time. Joe Mazzulla was 34 years old at the time that they gave him that job. And, there was he makes some comments and there are some weird headlines and he seems kind of insecure sometimes, but absolutely up to it. And yeah, man, I mean, look, I think Joe Mazzulla is a really good coach and I love his belief system, but it's like, yeah, great roster to work with. Great ingredients to cook with.
And at the same time, this current configuration like works for the next year or two. This is not like, and that's the great thing about it. And it's the thing about the bet is like, hey, not only is this stuff going to come together and we're going to have good enough health, but we're going to have it right now. Because if one of these years goes nuclear with injuries, you may not salvage these three dudes specifically. There are two of them that if their body has a blowout, it might affect them for a long time. And it could have put a shotgun shell in the middle of your lineup. So yeah, it's a combination of things. And this is what everybody tells you about the NBA. Like, you need a little bit of luck. Is this an unsatisfying year to watch the finals? Yes. Am I going to lay some of that at the feet of ESPN? Yes. Very, very weird how the early rounds, we built tension. We talked about rivalries. We also got good series, but we produced the hell out of them and we sold them all week. And then you have the finals where you have the most opportunity to talk storylines and build it up and make people anticipate the games. And this is the most normal feeling set of games that I have ever seen presented to me by a television network. Like, it just felt like a complete and utter afterthought.
I would
And it's
be so
strange.
mad if I worked for the NBA at the way ESPN presented those finals games. I mean, there's literally nothing more important. All of this, everything everyone does has been building to this series. And it gets, like from the pregame show of it's gonna be a little first takey, and then Woj is gonna break news and talk about news that could happen to other teams that aren't in the finals to, I guess a new crew that did not have great chemistry and maybe they could develop that over time. But yeah, it was not great in the way that it was presented.
Yeah, it's been very weird. And look, it was illustrative of, if you've been paying attention, we talk sports media stuff here all the time. ESPN has been systemically, cutting staff and shifting their model toward paying 10 people boatloads of money to be their whole network. And it's because they missed an early shift to digital media. They were not prepared for streaming. They got there late. And now they have the guy after the innovator as the executive. And this happens at a lot of large organizations. They're just cannibalizing themselves and their own market to get the most views and the most money right now. And that means throwing a boatload of cameras and money at Stephen A. Smith and saying, this is our basketball product. That's a mistake. Stephen A. Smith is a take artist. He's an entertainer. That's not what anybody wants for finals coverage.
Did you see the video of
for me.
Bob Costas going around after the 1998 finals where he just does a 2-minute monologue kind of summing up, his experience covering Jordan and wondering where the sport is going, and basically saying, hey, I don't think there's going to be as much continuity just in general in pro sports going forward, a correct prediction, and also just praising Jordan for being this flawed but authentic figure. Is this great 2-minute monologue. I tweeted it. It was making the rounds, but I was like, man, this is so good at presenting the product, which should be the most important thing that you have.
This is that's a perfect name to bring up, because the thing that you're missing, the fancy Latin word that you say, is gravitas. And Bob Costas has it. Al Michaels has it. Jim Nantz has it. Nobody involved with the production of the NBA finals has it.
I'm thrilled to see NBC get a piece of the NBA package next year, because it seems like they still remain great at presenting games. Like Sunday Night Football it seems like this incredible production. I just have confidence that they will do it the right way, and I'm excited to see where it goes. They just know how to set people up for success and put the right people in there.
And of course, we're all jazzed for Round Ball Rock. Yeah, so there's people would tell you that there's not like ratings or financial correlation in terms of performance. Like everybody will tell you that what it comes down to is, do you have the rights for a popular sports product? Yes, you do. Okay, you will have viewers. Put on a competent show and the viewers will be there. The games and the results will decide it. However, NBC, CBS, the big, traditional TV networks that we're used to have continued to prioritize having the best crew, the best production, even though data shows business wise that's not what moves the needle. You know what it does do though? It means that that part is never the talking point. You're never getting like empty calories. Like everything feels bigger. And maybe that doesn't translate to some substantial marker on a graph somewhere, but it does mean that I never have to just crap on the booth. Their booths are all good. We're having debates right now in football about like what just happened to Greg Olsen because he was incredible and now he's going to be replaced by Tom Brady and nobody can even really argue about it. Like that's the stuff that's going on in places that aren't ESPN. So yeah, weird.
It feels like some of the media in general just has a hard time finding interesting things to say about the most successful teams. Like there was all this stuff about Jokic when he was making his run last year, where I think it was Chris Mannix, who's like a respected journalist. I read his stuff. He's good, but he was like, the Nuggets just aren't compelling. And it's like, man, this like the guy who's the best player in the NBA was this little fat kid who likes to ride horses, and he has like some of the best hand-eye coordination we've seen ever of anyone ever. Like his signature shot, the Sombor shuffle, where it's like this wrong-footed fadeaway he just made up when he was on the mend from a sprained ankle, and he used to fight with his brothers all the time. It's like, I don't know how you can't find interesting stuff to say here. And it's like the Celtics. There's so much interesting stuff going on with the Celtics. Like Jason Tatum, yes, he was just like doing every meme he ever saw on YouTube afterwards. Maybe he's not like the most exciting guy or anything, but like there is exciting stuff here of Drew Holiday, multiple time NBA champion, Al Horford in year 18, finally getting over the hump and winning a championship. I mean, so many, and it just like, if you can't find interesting stuff to say about the most successful NBA teams in today's NBA where the talent is so great, it's like, do something else.
So the struggle is like, we know people that do speak in compelling ways about basketball. And it's just that they're not live television personalities. Like I could find Zach Lowe interesting. I for sure would love to hear Tim Legler do a game. Like there are absolutely people that
Windhorst is great. Like Windhorst is great in writing. When I see him on TV, I find him interesting. Windhorst grasps story, he's just a talented storyteller.
You have to give a crap. Like so many of the people that are landing in the booth. And part of the reason like why, I'm not a big JVG Mark Jackson guy. I'm not. Their booth was fine, but it's fine for like, do you want to laugh while the basketball game's going on? Because they said a bunch of stuff that doesn't make any sense, that honestly made them sound dumb sometimes. But then they'd like tell you a story from 1997 and you'd laugh, or they'd rip each other and you'd get a laugh out of it. But they were not enhancing the game. They were just adding a comedy show to it. It was like an alt cast. We have not done a great job of like developing booths to do compelling basketball games. There are a few dudes that can do it, but you need a color guy and a play-by-play guy, and they need to both matter. And somebody has got to build this thing up in the way like the 80s, 90s, and the football calls of today, the way those stories are teed up from the second the broadcast starts to how they're wrapped. You're talking about like Jokic being like hard to cover, or people saying he's boring. He doesn't just like to ride horses. You know what's unique? He wants to ride non-thoroughbred, like dumpy horses that pull like essentially modern day chariots. That's what he's into. And he sneaks away from his team during the playoffs to go visit stables like that. That's a thing.
Yeah. Jokic also just like rejecting what it is to be a famous person today, and that helping him stay sane is really interesting in and of itself, especially when you see like what's happened with Zion, what's happened with Ja, all this other stuff. I mean, his rejection of that and him wanting to be a normal person seems to help him keep a clear head. But we don't have to go down this road. All right. Anything else from the finals before we finish up with some draft stuff?
Yeah, I just want to just shout like good for the Celtics. Every finals year can't be the greatest finals ever. I'm not going to hold it to that bar. Do not go out here and try to undercut the Celtics winning the title. Like, why do we have to do that? Don't cannibalize it. They won a title. They were better than everybody. They've been the best team all year. The West got trounced by the Mavericks and they beat the Mavericks. So congrats to the Celtics. Awesome for Tatum. Really awesome for Jaylen Brown. Like, Jaylen Brown was the biggest contract in the league that they're going to regret. Can't dribble with his left hand. And he learned and did enough. Sure, it's an awesome roster. It's an awesome, assisting cast. But that dude got ripped a lot and then ends up your finals MVP. Like, there's a ton of cool stories. There are.
Yeah, I agree, man. All right. NBA draft, a little less than a week away. We still have no idea who's going number one. Most of the mocks have Zachary Richesay. Wow, Richesay going number one to the Atlanta Hawks right now. French wing who can shoot the ball. Are you buying it? Do you actually think Richesay is coming off the board number one on Wednesday?
No, I think that's absolute horse crap.
That's my guess too.
Yeah, I hate when pandering from teams is this transparent. Look, Atlanta has two centers that they've been trying to sell one at every single, and they had three. John Collins was just there. They had three, and they needed to get rid of two for the last like 5 windows. We're now again at a window where they would like to get rid of one, but they don't want to broadcast that they're going to take one of the centers at one because it proclaims that one of the centers they currently have has to leave, thus dropping his expected price. No one believes you. Here's my thing with Richesay. If it was someone else, I might have believed you. If you told me Reed Shepherd, I might have believed you. Richesay is tall. Sure. Can he shoot? Yes, he can. As a standstill shooter, sure. Can he do anything else all that well? No. Is his athleticism like eye-popping, or is he just large? He's just large. His athleticism and his comps for that athleticism, if you go look into them at all, is not great. And there's a couple, like there's a little analytical model that takes his measurements and his agility drills and then throws them into a data pool and spits out the guys that match him the most. Let me tell you, go check out Yaya Dubin on Twitter and look at the chart for Zachary Richesay. You will not like the names that you see. And he's not an athletic freak. He's not an all-time shooter. He doesn't have a discernible skill that you're like, yeah, this is the one. He's a large wing who can shoot, who is probably the best and most seasoned as a basketball player at this point as we enter the draft of the big wing guys. There's no way that they're taking him one. There's no way. I don't even believe he goes top 3, honestly.
Who do you think are the actual candidates if you're not buying Richesay to go number one, assuming Atlanta stays there?
Oh, I think it's Klingon. I think it's Klingon. I mean, Sar is who like I would probably take just on the athleticism bet. And if I'm them, what am I really doing? I'm going to retool this whole thing. I might as well take the biggest swing that I can. But I think a ton of teams like Klingon. I think it was a little at first, he was kind of in the 7 or 8 range. He kind of climbed into the 10, whatever that means. We're in the heat of prospect eval right now. The guys that we talked about that were going to climb above 20 all did because people looked at them now. Like Bub is above 20 in everybody's mocks now. Collier is in most of them. Ware is anywhere from 10 to 17 in most of them. All the guys that we love are now mocked way higher than they were. I think Klingon is going to pop for a lot of people. His analytics are great. His ability to progress through the season was great. If the passing and the creation is real at all, there's a possibility that he's like defensively Rudy Gobert, but more applicable offensively. And that's as good a swing as there is anywhere in here. But that would also telegraph that one of your centers in Atlanta is leaving. So that's what I think it is.
I
It's a
like
guess.
Klingen quite a bit. The body and the health stuff does scare me a little bit. He's playing like 20 minutes a game at UConn. I don't look at him and I'm like, I have as much confidence in this massive guy staying healthy as like Zach Edey. Like Zach Edey just seems like a safer bet to just be healthy. But I like Klingen quite a bit, and I think I've made this point repeatedly. But the thing that really sells me on him is like he could pass the ball a little bit and play make, and that matters to me. Besides the defensive stuff and just being huge and gobbling up rebounds. I mean, he's a safe pick. This is a weird draft. I think it's certainly possible. You know who I think has got to be feeling like kind of good right now is the Houston Rockets, who got the number 3 pick. It seems like Reed Shepherd definitely going to be available there, barring something unforeseen. Maybe they could trade this pick. I think they're at an interesting spot. And like if their draft is just, we just took Reed Shepherd, that's a pretty good outcome in this weird draft, right?
Yeah, honestly, I think I said it last pod. If Reed Shepherd was 2 or 3 inches taller, he's the number 1 pick, and we're not debating it. Like if he's just a little bit bigger, we'd bet on the historic level of shooting and assume that he'll learn something else. But because he's small and isn't exactly a point guard and is going to need to learn a lot of that stuff, because right now he's an all around shooter. He's a pull up shooter. He's a motion shooter, and he sinks it at like record breaking pace. I could see him going anywhere in the top 3. I could see him going 1, honestly, still, because the guys just aren't, there's not this like crazy bet that's like, yeah, this is the one that I should bet my franchise on. I think Houston would probably be completely content to have him. And look, if I'm them and for some reason Sar is still there, obviously my phone, if I'm Houston, my phone is, I'm waiting to pick it up, hoping somebody calls me. That's the best outcome in the world for them. But if it's Sar or Shepherd, I'm thrilled. But like, this is why the Risa Shades thing is so funny to me. I don't even believe he's like a top 3 person. And so for him to be the hypothetical, immediately unanimous number 1 is just a little comical.
Okay. I think Gavoni's latest mock draft said Reed Shepherd has a really good chance to either go 3 to Houston or 4 to the San Antonio Spurs. Spurs have been linked to Stephon Castle a lot at 4 as well. At 5, Trajan Langdon in his first draft in Detroit, he's getting linked heavily to Matas Buzelis, who
My guy.
Matas Buzelis' father is Jonas Valanciunas' physiotherapist. His father works for the Lithuanian national team. So kind of a fun little connection there. I bet Trajan has known, about Matas for a long time and probably knows him. So that would be a funny little thing there.
It's weird. So for folks who aren't as nerdy as me and read like the mocks every day as they change, everybody has had Detroit on Buzelis the entire time. And it's just strange that it's been like that pinpointed because nobody has been that concrete in like the top 10, but pretty much everybody has been on Buzelis to Detroit the whole time. And the idea is the shooting, because he shot well in high school and he's supposed to be a shooter, but he shot terribly this past year. So, then confirmation comes in when you're like, hey, and they're adding Fred Vinson. So if Fred Vinson's going to be there and the shooter needs to work on his shot, now they have Fred, then it's definitely Buzelis. Could also be Ron Holland. I could buy either one of those for Detroit. Realistically, Ron Holland, like, he's getting weirdly underrated for how much he was able to produce already. And it's a lot because of the shot. And he needs work on it, but I could buy it. Like, he's somebody that could end up reaching a higher point than you thought. But yeah, my guy Buzelis that I maybe ripped a little too much in trying to make a different point earlier in the podcast series. Might end up in Detroit. Totally possible.
Something else that was notable in the ESPN mock draft that came out today, Zach Edey to the Miami Heat at number 15. I've heard that Zach Edey has worked out well for teams, and I've heard that one of the workouts that went extremely well was Miami. Apparently, he just crushed it. I mean, he kind of does have that heat culture mentality, I think. I mean, he's just a very intense guy who seems serious about basketball. I think that's a potential fit.
Look, that's one of the places, like the places where I think he makes the most sense are the places where there is no pressure for him to like break into the starting lineup or that have versatility if it works out. Like have a cemented center, and if it happens to work out, there's a way they could roll it out together. And they're one of them. I think, for me, it's them. And then once you get into, I think Phoenix makes a ton of sense. I think after that, I struggle. I don't think Milwaukee makes as much sense as some people do, but like New York, Boston, if he drops in that late area, it won't shock me if any of them like has a very specific plan for him and is like a good fit. All the mocks have started moving him up, and yeah, it looks like it tends to be either OKC or the Heat, like taking him super early, and everybody just saying like these are the franchises that would just say, I know a talent when I see it. It's weird. It's different. I'll find a way to make it work.
Your boy Bub Carrington, 20th to the Cavs in the ESPN mock the draft today. That would be a little bit painful. One spot ahead of where the Pels are picking.
Yeah, that's my guy. That is my guy. Yeah, I like honestly, it wouldn't shock me a lot of places. I could see him going as high as like he could go as high as 10 to me. It wouldn't shock me at all if any of these teams that have a guard need end up evaluating him higher than people think, and we perceive it as like this crazy climb. But if you looked at any of these dudes with the same depth, it just kind of takes teams a while to work guys out and like really get into the depths of scouting these people. When we get closer to the draft, all of a sudden these ideas firm up, and these guys that were like perceived as the 30th were always the 10th or 12th best player. Wouldn't shock me if OKC did it. Wouldn't shock me, especially the Kings. I will be surprised if Bub gets past both of those teams.
And then 21, Yves Missi, a guy we've talked about a lot. I think one of the interesting things was in this mock that Gavoni put out today, Ware was still on the board. He had Yves Missi going 21 to the Pelicans, and then Ware going 23 to the Milwaukee Bucks. Yeah, that would be fascinating if both those guys are there and the Pelicans can pick between them. Do you have a preference there?
Yeah. I would prefer to not do Jackson Hayes with a nicer work ethic. I would like the guy who has stuff that can go on the floor right now. And that, yeah, maybe that wasn't clear. That's Missi. Missi is very, very raw and blocks people in really athletic ways and does really athletic stuff, but kind of has no idea what he's doing and fouls people a lot. That part is reminiscent of Jackson Hayes. I guess it's confusing because Ware looks more like Jackson Hayes. So give me the looks like more than the plays like. I will struggle to think Ware is going to be there. So I'm consuming all of the mocks. It wasn't just ESPN that moved us to Missi. Everyone moved us to Missi. So again, just like Ricochet, everyone heard the same thing on the same day that made them all change their mocks to put us on Missi, no matter what it meant. And pretty much all the mocks have had us on a center the whole time because it's an obvious need for us. But it's just interesting when they all circle the same thing on the same day when they refresh their mock and everybody changes their pick to the same guy. Because clearly someone wanted that known.
They like Missi. He seems like a nice guy. They think he's smart. The Pelicans value being nice and what they perceive as smart. Look, position of need. He's big. He's athletic. You can sell yourself on. He only started playing organized basketball 3 years ago. There is incredible potential that is still untapped. I don't know. I don't know that much about Missi. I watched the Baylor game against Duke, and I was like, okay, these flashes are flashes. I love these flashes, but I don't have a fantastic read. I can't tell you. I was sitting there cranking out Baylor games this year.
Hey, I have in the past, but I did not watch very much college basketball until now. Like I started watching like specific games trying to develop opinions about these people. But I did not watch during the season because college basketball has eroded to a place where it's tough.
That's brutal.
Women's college basketball was very entertaining in a lot of spots this past year, but men's was tough. Just a lot of dudes like drive and kick and miss, drive and kick and miss over and over and over again. My summary on Missi is just he is a hyper athlete. He is incredibly raw. I think he is the best, like after Sar, he is the best like pure athlete bet that there is available in like the top 20 picks. I would understand if Ware and Collier and Bub all aren't there and nobody like shocking fell. I would totally understand, like, if you have to stay there, you don't think you can trade back. I get taking Missi. I do. That's the only way that I get it though, because I can't for the life of me figure out how that dude is going to play into your rotation. There's no way he's going to play into your rotation in year one. It's not going to happen. Year 2 and 3, like are you taking this pick like just to like go shelf a center? Are we confident in Carlo? Are we adding 2 centers in the offseason? It's just a lot to ask. And there's dudes there that can do something that could potentially help you this year.
So what's your prediction on what the Pelicans do with this pick about a week out?
I mean, I think all of our more favored guys aren't going to be there. I think if I had to guess right now, I would bet trade back and like take Mogbo. I went and started digging into Mogbo after Shamit mentioned him on here. Schmidt, sorry, I don't know why I said it that way. And Mogbo is really interesting. Like if we're going to go athletic bet, and you're considering Missi, Mogbo has not had like great coaching development or facilities yet. He battled his way to get to San Francisco. He played at tiny little places, was completely missed as a prospect. He has the largest wingspan differential from his height, essentially in this class.
How tall is he and what's his wingspan?
He's like 6'9". He's right on the fringe of 6'9", and his wingspan is like 7'3", 7'4". It's something really stupid. Might even be 7'5". It's dumb. He is essentially the largest wingspan differential. Oh, and he's a legitimate playmaking 4. Like he is a point forward in a sense. He drives in the middle of the floor and makes really unique plays and passes, and he's huge. And he's a real defender who can really rebound. He's intriguing. Like he looks like he could cause a problem. If you put him in a lineup, I just don't think people would really know what to do with him. He can't shoot a lick, probably never will, but he's really strong and he's really athletic and he's a hell of a dunker. So just like, thinking of like if you took Larry and like made him a 20-year-old hyper athlete again, and made him a better passer and a better dunker. Yeah, that's kind of Mogbo to me. Like, and I see what Schmidt saw, and I wonder if anybody in this draft is going to immediately benefit from being like on the NBA program with NBA coaches. It's the dude who battled his way for 3 years to get finally to a place where he like played real basketball at San Francisco and like could just really use exposure to like the best minds in the business in nutrition and sports science and just basketball.
He's a Mogbo maniac, folks. He was a Carlo crazy. Are you still a Carlo crazy or no?
I mean, I want to see what's going to happen in camp, but I can't know anything. I want to see, like, I'm in a dead period. Look, for what it's worth, he proved that the G League sucks. So the G League, he beat the G League bar, but no one defends in the G League. So I just don't know. I've just got to like wait and see what happens in camp. Like I got to hear like what we think once we see him do stuff. I do think it was a little unique how like during the playoffs and stuff, he was in the crowd. Like he had seats in the club section. He was sitting by my friends. He was at every game in the crowd watching the Pels play. So
Carlo can actually sit in the Carlo Crazies fan section if he wants to.
Yeah.
If that were
he does. He does right now. And same guy, funny enough, shout out to my boy Tyler, same guy who spotted Carlo during the playoff series also ended up on an airport tram with Ware. So, hey, shout out to Tyler and finding all of the big guys in Pelicans lore.
One of the funny things I heard about Ware, and I'll leave you with this, big cat guy. Seriously. He's a cat guy.
Big cat guy like tigers and lions, or he's a big, really could go for a tabby.
He is not a dog guy. He is the opposite of a dog guy. He is a cat guy.
All right. Okay. There are cat guys. All right. Okay.
I don't know. I'm a dog guy, but
you know
that's
what?
My scouting report.
If that gets him to drop to 21, let's put it out there. Look, guys, he likes cats, and that's weird. And you shouldn't want him. You leave him. We got stray cats all by the coffee shops around here and by dumpsters. He can adopt them all.
All right, buddy. I think we're going to do one of these episodes pre-draft next week, targeting Monday, and then we will definitely convene for a post-draft show. I'm really looking forward to next week. Should be a lot of fun. I think the next few weeks are going to be a lot of fun. There's going to be a lot of activity. It's going to be exciting. Thanks for doing this, and we will talk again soon.